So during my previous episode of the Southern Joe West Ham show, that's it up there, I promised that I would apologise to any reporter that correctly predicted a transfer of ours. Will I need to apologise? Well, we'll table that for later. Let's talk more about what I believe is involved in a transfer from a real-world standpoint. That and more coming up. Oh, here comes the theme. Come on, you Irons! G'day, West Ham mates. This is the Southern Joe West Ham show. I'm your West Ham mate from down under, Southern Joe, and welcome to episode 8. So when we see reports of a potential transfer, or we actually see a transfer being completed, we see a microcosm of what really goes on. I believe that this is from a combination of the lack of detail in most reports, along with the way most of us see transfer details, how they're conducted in manager mode in like a console game. Now, in the manager mode of the console game, your animated self as manager of your team, of course West Ham, you know what your budget is, and you've already scouted that the player you would like to sign is gettable. Now, in a meeting between you and the other team's rep or manager, you size up how much you would like to offer the other club, be it a player swap, a swap with cash, maybe just cash, and perhaps sell-on clauses. Now, this sell-on clause means that if you decide to on-sell the said player in the future, the club you're now buying from get an agreed cut of that fee. You decide all this within minutes and without even knowing whether this player really would like to play for your club. Now, but more on that in a moment. So if the club says yes to your proposal, you then have this computerized meeting with the player and his agent in a cafe or a restaurant. Here you get the agent to agree to how important the player will be to the squad, how many years he'll sign for, a yes or no to a release clause, and the wages and possible bonuses said player will agree to. If all that goes well, you have a new player to insert into your squad. And that's how most of us seem to see transfers. The players are just talented meat suits that join our club in order to help us win games. Now, while that is the end game for us as supporters, some of us forget that those talented meat suits are human beings who have been dedicating the best physical years of playing a sport they love to their job. And this can be seen as a dream job for those of us that have struggled to even make a difference in a game in the park. But it would have its built-in stresses like any other job. Now, over the past few days, every time I've thought about the totality of what would go into a player moving from one team to another and what it would entail, I go down deeper and deeper rabbit holes every time. Let's look at it this way. Think about whatever job you do now. If someone was to offer you a new job doing the same thing, but you would have to relocate, what would it take financially, emotionally, and support from your family-wise for you to successfully pull off such a move? That's how I looked at this. Trying to keep it as simple is a hard thing, but let's try. First of all, does the partner have a career? If it's in the real world, it will go on for a lot longer than the few short years a footballer would have, even if the player was one of the lucky few to go past a decade of top-flight playing. Now, do they have kids? They have to get used to a new surrounding, a new school, and possibly a new language if they're coming from a country where a different language is spoken. Where will they all live? Will it already be furnished? Or do they need to go out and buy a few things? If it's a foreign player, how about work permits and or appropriate visas so they can play for their new team? Being that a footballer is a full-time job, they're still classified as workers for the intents and purposes of taxation and other live in that country scenarios. Before all that is even decided on, is the player even open to moving clubs? No use buying a player who wouldn't be happy. Even if you convince Mbappe's club to sell him to us, what about what will player harmony in the squad be like? You can buy the best player, but if that player disrupts harmony, he can't win a game all on his own. This isn't the under-10s where some big kid can just barrel their way through an entire team. How about medicals? And is the player already carrying an injury? Even if all this gets the green light, you still have admin, meeting the team, finding out tactics and playing philosophies, and getting jerseys and kits organised. There's also the in-house reporter doing a spread on the new player for the club website, and photographer for the same. Let's also do an internal interview for publicity if possible. All that and more just for one player. Now multiply that by several just for incomings. Now don't forget that the exit stuff needs to happen behind the scenes for outgoing players as well. So you can see how all this would be time consuming, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a wealth of details. And this would be happening at every professional club across this big blue marble we call Earth. All this is to say that support the team. Don't just react to a report as though it was gospel. The people behind the scenes study all available data and physical scoutings over many days and weeks. So being on the inside, there is a greater chance that they will know what they want and why better than us aces, armchair experts. Don't ever think that anyone from the chairman all the way down to the reserve boot studder doesn't have the club's best interests at heart. Sure, there'll be missteps, but there'll be unexpected joys. Who here can honestly say what they thought signings like Jared Bowen or Mikey Antonio or even Dimitri Payet was going to be like when they were signed? Even Aaron Creswell was under everyone's radar. Give every signing a chance to succeed, especially the new gaffer, Senor Hulen. Treat each and every one of them like you would treat a member of your family was signed for the Hammers, or it was a treasured friend that signed. I feel that supporting West Ham is truly one of the great joys in life. We don't try and bend the rules like certain rich clubs do. Now, we have some plastic supporters. Everyone does. But at our core, and it's a very thick core, we're full of passionate, loyal, and dedicated supporters. We are at the precipice of stepping up to the next level. We've had David Moyes bring us glory and take us to top 10 in the Premier League. Senor Hulen will look to take us to the next level, and we need to lift our game and take the ride up with them. By the way, there's been some here that have taken an unnecessary negative attitude towards the new boss. Now, he has won a Europa League title, something we haven't done yet. He has won European championships for his native Spain at under 19 and under 21 level. But people are focusing on how he left Wolves after a short stint. Now, as long as the work environment stays positive and he's not lied to, like it is alleged that Wolves did, then I believe we will have a mainly fruitful tenure with Senor Hulen. Already a positive change has happened. Remember the days when we had to wait till nearly the end of the transfer window to hear about most signings? Well, we already have a signing that's been confirmed before the window opened. So will I be apologising? Well, it's not that cut and dry. Let's reset the markers and reveal all after this short break. Welcome back to the Southern Joe West Ham show. Time to talk about results. As of this recording, we have confirmed our first signing, the young Brazilian starlet, Luis Guilherme. That's another change that I started to talk about in the previous segment. Not only have we signed someone early in the transfer window, but we have signed a young gun rather than a known entity who's possibly on his way down and looking for one last payday. So, to Fabrizio Romano, I do apologise that I put you in with all these copy and paste hacks. Most of them are reposting your crap or making stuff up and attributing it to you. To those, and this is from Nigerian-based sites full of clickbait and some British ones as well, check your sources. I'll quote the latest on these poorly thought out stories and use it as a word of warning when trawling through the transfer rumour mill. There's a Facebook page called The Real West Ham Fans that post many of the iffy articles, and they're iffy at best. This one is titled, "He Chose Not to Help. David Moyes Reveals How Declan Rice Deliberately Made West Ham Suffer." I'll read you some of it. David Moyes has recently opened up about how Declan Rice's decision on the pitch ultimately made West Ham worse by forcing Moyes to adjust his tactical approach. Although this might sound exaggerated at first, it's difficult to recall a player in recent memory who has been more significant for West Ham than Declan Rice. For many years, Rice was a world-class talent for the Hammers, and his exceptional performances have finally earned him widespread recognition now that he's at Arsenal. Rice's tenure at West Ham was marked by numerous accolades, including captaining the team to their first trophy in over 40 years. Throughout his time with the club and even after his departure, he has consistently shown respect for his former team. Yet Moyes, who is also considered one of the greatest managers in West Ham's history, believes that his managerial success could have been even greater if not for Rice's intense desire to prove his critics wrong. So, while this assertion might seem surprising, Moyes provided insight into the tactical challenges posed by Rice's ambitions. According to Moyes, Rice wanted to play in a more advanced position during their second year together. He wanted to get forward more in the second year, as Moyes explained. In our first year, we had a successful dynamic with Thomas Souček, making runs into the box and scoring goals while Declan sat back. However, Declan felt the pressure from critics who doubted his abilities because he wasn't scoring goals or getting forward enough. This criticism seemed to affect Declan, and he wanted to prove them wrong. Now, firstly, how many fans complain that Moyes never changed his tactics? First red flag right there. Second of all, I had some spare time and Googled whether there was an actual interview that Mr. Moyes was supposed to have said all this, seeing as the article doesn't quote a source. Now, best thing I found was an interview on TalkSport on YouTube. The two hosts for their coverage of Euro 24 was in one hotel room, while David Moyes was in another room. Now, I had to check the dates because it looked like something that was done in lockdown during the pandemic. They're all previewing the upcoming game between Serbia and England. Now, they asked Moyes, as being the recently departed West Ham boss, about Declan. And Moyes had nothing but praise for Dec. He didn't bag out his tactics in any way. He also reminded the hosts that he wanted any potential transfer fee to be north of £150 million. He reminded the hosts about how everyone thought he was crazy to make such a demand. He thought we sold Rice too cheaply. He then reminded the hosts how elite Dec has become. Once again, folks, be careful of these man bites dog football stories. But even in his zeal to be still the number one transfer guru, Fab Romano sometimes gets things wrong, so he needs to tread carefully on when he states, "Here we go." Now, from here on in, I'll only call out the most humorous of transfer bulltish, and maybe just talk about who has come in officially and who has been future endeavoured. By the way, if you're into pro wrestling, check out my YouTube show, If You See Kayfabe. It's a different and positive look at wrestling. Until we meet again, this is your West Ham mate from down under saying hooroo.